So Mark, I guess your current title is you're the Vice President and General Manager for PAS?
That's correct.
Which is a PAG company?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay, and we're here at your facility in Peachtree City?
Yes, Peachtree City, Georgia.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us. I guess I'd like to start off with, how did you get interested in aviation maintenance, aircraft maintenance as a career?
Absolutely. I always say it found me, I did not find it. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a small town in east central Alabama, in Sylacauga, Alabama, and I did not have airplanes or helicopters in my life growing up. Didn't know anything about them. I did know that from an early age that I wanted to be in the military. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what to do in the military. I just knew I wanted to go. So,
did you have relatives that had served?
I did.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I had a couple of uncles that were career Army. But so when I finished high school, I went to Jacksonville State University because my mother asked me to go. I didn't really want to go. Yeah. So she asked me to go. So I went for a couple of years, and then I decided that I would join the Air Force. Mm-hmm. And when I joined the Air Force, I still did not have any idea about aircraft maintenance. I just went down, I joined, they had me on some program called Missile Liquid Systems Propellant, and I found out later that was fueling ICBMs. Right? Okay. So one day in basic training, the drill instructor called me in and said that my tech school had been postponed for 7 months and would I like to cross train? And I'm like, absolutely, I do. And I said, but I don't know into what. And he said, well, the Air Force really needs aircraft mechanics. I said, that will do it. Put me down for that. Yeah. And he said, do you want fighters or transport? I said, put me down for fighters. So that's how it all began.
Really?
Yes.
So growing up as a kid, did you work on your own vehicles? I mean, you had some mechanical aptitude and experience?
I did. It was mostly lawnmowers because my dad had me cutting grass every week. So when the lawnmower would break, I'd fix the lawnmower.
Okay.
And then in high school, I had a '68 Camaro hot rod, and I had a Chevrolet four-wheel drive truck. So we were always tinkering and working on those things.
Okay.
Yes.
So you ended up, I assume, going to work on the aircraft maintenance on the fighter jets instead of on the ICBMs.
I did. I ended up in Anchorage, Alaska, at Elmendorf Air Force Base, working phase dock inspections on T-33s. It was the oldest aircraft in the inventory for the Air Force at the time. After those 2 years were up, I got relocated to Shaw Air Force Base in Columbia, South Carolina, which was headquarters of the 9th Air Force, and I got a brand new F-16. It had 3.5 hours.
Wow.
On it. So I got to paint my name on a brand new F-16, and so that's what I did for 2 more years.
Yeah. What kind of systems were you working on? Because sometimes you're concentrating on airframe or maybe power plant. Did you get to do a little variety?
I was actually a crew chief.
Okay.
I was responsible for the entire aircraft. I was responsible for the airworthiness of that aircraft and to launch and recovery.
Okay.
So it was pretty much different every day.
Yeah. But you didn't retire from the military. I mean, you ended up getting out after, I think you had said 4 or 5 years?
I did. I did 4 years active duty. And then I wanted to get my AMP, my airframe power plant. So being from Alabama, I was familiar with Alabama Aviation College in Ozark. So when I separated from the Air Force, I went to Alabama Aviation College, acquired my AMP. But during that time, my instructor helped me get a job at Fort Rucker for the maintenance contractor for the helicopter trainers. Okay.
So you were working as you were still completing your AMP?
That's correct.
Oh,
yes, sir.
Building up some experience and some hours. Okay.
That's correct. So I was in the, back then they called it the accelerated program. It's because I've already had the required experience through the Air Force. So you could just take the test, right? So, but who knows how to take the test? So, so I went to school to learn how to finish that segment so I could complete the test.
Right. There's a lot of topics that you weren't exposed to.
That's correct.
Working on F-16s.
That's correct.
Jet aircraft.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you took the test, you passed, you had fresh AMP now.
That's right.
You continued working there at Fort Rucker?
I did. I worked at Fort Rucker for 4 years, flight line maintenance. And my first helicopter that I worked on was the Huey, the UH-1 Huey. it's still my favorite helicopter to this day.
Yeah, there's still a lot of them flying.
Yes, it's a great machine, great machine. And then after that, those 4 years, I actually lived 2.5 hours away, was my hometown. So, like you said, I was young and single at the time, and I moved. Well, actually, I got married during that time, but I moved. I didn't move. I drove to Sylacauga on the weekends. So when I was working at Fort Rucker, my hometown was in Sylacauga, Alabama, 2.5 hours away. So on the weekends, I would go there. And one weekend, I pulled up into Sylacauga, and right there in the First Baptist Church parking lot sat the 206 L3 that was Caraway Hospital's lifesaver.
Okay.
And something just moved inside me, and I said, that's what I want to do. I want to work on helicopters and help people.
Yeah. So how did you figure out how to get your foot in the door in that side of helicopter maintenance?
Well, we could talk about that one for hours. That's a story in and of itself.
Yeah, because
right?
you saw that's what I want to do.
Right.
But how do you get there? Yeah.
So the action I took, well, I filled out an application and never heard a word. So I took an action, and that was to resign from Fort Rucker and move to Sylacauga and start working in Birmingham. So I did. I took a job up there with a fixed wing company, and I didn't like it. It wasn't a helicopter, and I didn't like doing that work. So I actually, and the company didn't have medical insurance, and I had a new baby at the time.
Yeah.
So I actually took a job back in a textile mill as a maintenance technician in a textile mill. And I absolutely hated that. I couldn't stand it because it wasn't part of my purpose.
Right.
And I knew it wasn't. So one day I was coming home, and I just started praying, and I just started laying it out. This is what I would like to have. And I just started naming things that I would like. And a couple of weeks later, of course, we had newspapers then. A couple of weeks later, there was an ad that came out in the paper for an AMP mechanic at Caraway Hospital. And I'm like, that's mine. That's my job.
And you had moved, you were there.
I'd moved, I was there. And as it turns out, the house that I was renting, the lady that owned the house that I was renting, her brother was the chief pilot there.
Wow.
You know?
Talk about a small world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got that job, and that was an incredible and most beloved job in the world.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about working for like an air ambulance operation, because it's not necessarily a 9 to 5.
No.
You know, those helicopters have to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. So how did being, working in that type of environment work out for you?
Yeah. So well, first thing, you must be committed. You have to be committed, and you have to understand that you are there to serve others, and people need you. And when someone calls you at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., they're not calling to have a chat. They're calling because you're the guy, and they need you, and they need your experience and expertise.
Okay.
So if someone is looking at going to work for an EMS company and they don't have that level of commitment, then they don't need to work there. It's very purpose driven.
Yeah. How many aircraft did they operate? How many mechanics working there?
At the time we had 3. They were all Bell 206, L3, and L4.
Okay.
We kept 2 flyable and 1 as a backup. Okay. And that's when the hospital actually owned the aircraft and owned the program at that time.
So normal hours were kind of 9 to 5, but was there always somebody on call?
24/7.
Okay.
Yes.
And you just rotated that responsibility for who was on call?
Well, it was only me and 1 other person.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was it.
And that kind of affects your personal life, because it's not like you can go out on say a Saturday night and go have a couple of beers and go to a movie or something, because
Right.
you have to be ready to go.
That's correct. And that's the way it was then. Now it's more of a provider-based, and they have teams of maintenance people, so you can actually have time off and time off the phone.
Okay. Yeah. So how long were you there? I mean, did you rise up to different levels of responsibility while you were working there?
I did. I started the first year I was working as a helicopter mechanic. Then the second year I was there 11 years total.
Okay.
The second year I was there, the director of maintenance just up and resigned one day. And the director of operations decided to name me as the director of maintenance for the Caraway Hospital Lifesaver Part 135 program.
Yeah. So a lot of people, through personal experience and interviewing directors of maintenance over the years, a lot of people are promoted because they were a great mechanic on the floor. Congratulations, you're the new director of maintenance.
Okay.
And that transition can be difficult, but how was it for you? And being that you were in the military and you had that exposure to the leadership training, to the mentality of teamwork, did that help out in your transition?
Well, it helped out tremendously. A lot of that is just being disciplined, that you have to do the job. The issue that I had was that at 31 years old, I just didn't know a lot about the civilian aviation world. And fortunately for me, one of the mechanic that I hired went to a Bell school, and he met one of the instructors there. His name was Buddy Evans, and Buddy became very instrumental in teaching me about FARs, teaching me about how really how the system runs. And Buddy became a lifelong friend, and he unfortunately passed away last year.
Okay.
And but he taught me a lot, you know. And Buddy was the one when we ran up on something we didn't know how to do. We said, "What would Buddy say?"
Yeah.
Or let's call him. Let's call him and get his opinion. Of course, you need to be ready to be on the phone for an hour because
Right.
he
can't just talk about that one problem.
one problem. But one of the key things that he taught me was, he said, "You're not thinking right." And I'm like, "I'm reading the manual." And he said, "That's not what I'm talking about." He says, "Your thought process is not right." And I said, "Explain that to me." And he says, "You have to use perspective." He said, "Think from a different perspective. What are you seeing? What is it doing? What is it supposed to do? And put it all together and sit and think about it. Think about what's actually happening, not what the book says is happening, because we know the book is, you're supposed to follow the book." He says, "But think about that. Think about what's actually happening here and what's going on." So I've been able to use that advice my entire career.
Yeah.
You know, when I run into a problem of any kind, I have to sit and think, because I'm a firm believer that the answer is inside you. You just have to think about it and let it bubble up to the surface.
Right.
So.
Okay. So how you were there a total of 11 years?
11
you said?
years. Yes, sir.
And then you made a transition. How did that work out?
I did. The hospital sold to a provider. They sold to Omniflight.
Okay.
And at first, I just wasn't thrilled with that. And at the time, a friend was the director of maintenance at Health South, and he called and asked if I wanted to come to work for Health South and work on their S-76. So I'm like, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea."
Okay.
So I was able to do that.
And that was still in the Birmingham
Still in
area?
Birmingham area. Yeah, so I did that. And it was a great job and great people. Gosh, I got so many OEM school training out of that. But then eventually the CEO of that company got in some hot water, and they decided to sell some of the aircraft. So I actually went from full-time to contractor, and then eventually lost that job, but went over to another fixed wing provider at the time. And I worked for them for a year or so, and it just wasn't a helicopter. And I was grateful for it. I was grateful to have the work. But I got a call one day from Omniflight asking me, they said, "Would you like to come back to work for us as a regional manager?" And I said, "Well, let me think about that." "Yes, I do. Absolutely."
Right.
So I was with Omniflight probably 7 or 8 years until they eventually sold to Air Methods. And then I came to work here at Precision Aircraft for Mr. David Mast, our CEO. The issue I had was I was living in Alabama and working here, so
Oh, wow.
it was a logistics nightmare for me. So I ended up and decided I was director of maintenance here, and decided that I just wanted to go home. I wanted to go home for a while, so I took a base mechanic job for Air Methods.
Okay.
It turned out to be a great move, and the difference was that being a base mechanic was that now I actually understood how a base mechanic job works, what it means. And I can tell you this for sure. I don't think that as an industry, I don't think we train our new young base mechanics to the standard that they need to be trained.
Right, because you're typically by yourself
You're by
in that
yourself.
remote base. So
That's right.
luckily you had a variety of experience
Yes.
before you stepped into that role. But
So what I learned was, when I go back, is that theoretically, even though I'm not the director of maintenance for the company, I felt like I was the director of maintenance for that base.
Yeah.
Not only that, I was director of logistics. I was shipping and receiving.
supply chain manager.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Fuel farm manager.
Yeah.
FAA representative or company representative to the FAA.
Right.
A little bit of everything, you know. So when people would say, "Oh, it's just a single engine helicopter," or "Oh, it's just one helicopter," I'm like, "Yeah, you don't get it." You know, I'm also an inventory specialist. Yeah, I have a lot of hats to wear here. You know, so by knowing that, I was able to stay ahead of everything. And by staying ahead of everything, then I could have off time and downtime and had minimum call-ins.
Yeah. And you're also working with the flight crew too. I mean,
Yes.
I'm sure you have a close relationship,
Yes.
you know, because you're there with that aircraft.
Yes. And the key to that is that flight crew, the nurse, the medic, or doctor, and pilot, they're watching, and they will know if you care about them, and they will know if you care about that aircraft. So if you demonstrate that, if you come into work, you clean your aircraft, you inspect it, you do your dailies, you do all your paperwork, you have a fresh status sheet every day, they know that, and they appreciate that, and they know that you care about them. And that way, when it's time for lunch, they don't leave you out. They're calling you to come in. You know, they're introducing you to people as important.
Yeah, so I guess on paper that move would have been a step down, but really it was kind of an expansion of your knowledge, your experience.
Right. For me, it was a reset.
Yeah.
For me, it was a reset because I had a close friend who kept telling me I shouldn't do that. He said, "You're going backwards." And I said, "I'm not going backwards." And we argued about that. You know, we had our differences. And then I'm like, well, it's kind of like this because I learned with word pictures. So I love archery. I love to shoot a bow, right? And I said, all I'm doing is I'm pulling that string back. I'm just pulling back, and I'm going to find my resting spot, and I'm going to find my anchor point, and I'm going to rest, and I'm going to look downrange, and at the right time, I'm going to hit the release, and that arrow is going out in my future.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's going to hit bullseye.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. My friend I was telling you about, Buddy Evans, he calls me up one day. And well, he first called me on this move. He said, "I understand why you're doing it." I said, "That's all I need is you for the affirmation of that." So he calls me up 4 years later. 4 years later, he calls me and he said, "I understand why you did this, but it's time for you to re-engage."
Okay.
And I said, "Yes, sir. You're exactly right."
And how did that happen?
A couple weeks later, Mr. David Mast gives me a call, and he said, "Are you working today?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, I'm going to come by and visit you." I said, "Okay." And I called my wife, and my wife says, "Hear him out, keep an open mind, and let's go from there." Very good. And I'll tell you right now, my wife is an anchor. She gives me the best advice of anybody. So anyway, David came by, gave him a tour of the base, and he said, I want you to come back to PAG. And he said, but this time I want you to come back as vice president and general manager. And I said, well, David, I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
And the first question I asked him was, I said, is Lindsay still there? Because if she's not, it's a deal breaker. And Lindsay is one of the works in administration here.
Okay.
She knows this company better than anybody that I know. And she's a huge, tremendous help. And he said, yes, she is there. And I said, second question, will I be allowed to sow into people? And he said, absolutely. He said, the people you think need training, I'll approve already. If you need OEM training, we're doing it. Whatever you think you need or want, we'll do it.
Yeah.
I said, yes, sir. So now we're going into almost 9 years later, and I can tell you straight up, he's kept his word to that. We train everyone here. I try to get everyone in at least 2 schools a year. Sometimes we have to bring the training in-house, but we get the training done.
Yeah, that's a big investment, and
it is.
It's valuable as mechanics to see that your company supports you and wants you to grow in your career and to be a more proficient mechanic, more knowledgeable mechanic.
Right. Personal and professional development is extremely important.
So working as a director of maintenance and then going into the sort of step down, but not really, to where now you're all of these different hats that you're working at on base as, the base mechanic. Now you're talking a whole other level now. Now you're a vice president, general manager. I'm sure that was a change in your responsibilities and what you needed to do. And how did that transition go? I mean, were there still mechanics here that you had worked with and now you're, above them?
That's correct. Yeah. Absolutely. All the above.
Yeah.
So in that conversation with Mr. Mast, I brought it up to him that I said, I am a relational person, not per se an analytical person. I said, now my wife's an accountant. She's a numbers person. I said, I'm not. Mm-hmm. She's a numbers person. I'm a talker. Yeah. So he said, that's okay. He said, I have accounting people. He said, I will expect you to be able to answer certain questions and to know certain things, which we'll discuss. But as far as all the accounting, you won't have to worry about that.
Okay. And
he said, I want you to run that shop like you ran the OmniFlight shop when we were in Noonan, Georgia. I said, yes, sir, I can do that.
Yeah.
Yep. And he said a couple of other things that were very important to me. He says, when you come to work for us, I can lay my head on my pillow at night and sleep knowing that you did your best to do the right thing.
Yeah. That speaks a lot of his confidence in you doing your job.
Yes, sir. So that was the criteria.
Yeah. So how long has it been that you've been here in your?
It's been 8.5 years.
Okay.
Going on 9. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So there's a lot of repair stations, all across, the country, well, all over the world, but you have competitors. So what do you think it is that maybe sets, PAG apart from some of the other ones? I mean, what do you guys, what is it, your culture? Is it your customer service? I mean,
it goes back to the EMS world. Mm-hmm. We all know that we're here to serve others. We're not self-serving. We are here to serve others. And in this case, that will be our customers.
Yeah.
Customer support, customer service. And one of the big differences is that as I look out this window, I think everyone here has served in the military or in law enforcement or in EMS or in all the above.
Yeah.
We've all come from a service mission-oriented background. So we all have the mentality and the knowledge that someone is counting on us. So that's why our doors are not locked at 5 o'clock in the evening.
Right.
We will stay late. We will work weekends if we have to. That's not something we love to do, but we will if someone is out of service, if someone's AOG, especially law enforcement or EMS. We're going to help that person.
That's awesome. So I'm sure every now and then you have to hire new mechanics to come on board. What do you look for in a new hire? What type of person, what experience, what do you look for?
That's a great question. Great question. I'm not sure I have the answer for that, because it's a thorn in my side. Before COVID, it seemed like there was qualified mechanics everywhere. Mm-hmm. But since COVID, they're nowhere. They're very hard to find. I'm having an issue with people, young people that come out of AMP school. Very few of them actually have an AMP certificate. They have to continue training and testing to get that. You would think that as soon as they came out of school, they would have the certificate, but it doesn't work that way. I'm not even sure some of them want to. We've had quite a few that we've run through. It's hard to find experienced mechanics. Mm-hmm. You can find the younger folks a little easier, but I'm not sure their commitment level. So I sat down and wrote a list of 26 things. I call them the standard of excellence through expectation. And I'm working that now. Okay. But it's just, and I'll tell you, the first one, show up ready to work. Yeah. And the next one is like, look, act and be professional. There's just a standard that we're going to expect from you.
Yeah, and it's a challenging time trying to find qualified mechanics. Right. And a lot of people competing for that smaller and smaller pool. I mean, there's other industries that are recruiting AMPs. There's no other technical school that teaches you the variety of technical skills, the welding, the engine work, the airframe, sheet metal work, all of that stuff. So they're recruited from people outside the aviation industry. Right. So it's challenging. But do you also look, we walked around the floor and everyone is working hard. They're helping each other out. It's apparent. It's a positive culture here at the facility. Do you also consider that? I mean, it's hard to look at a resume and really figure out who somebody is. But when you get that interview, are you trying to figure out, well, do they have a positive attitude? How will they fit in here, with everyone that's working? Right. You're going to make mistakes. Everyone does. But trying to look at that innate, non-technical attitude, if you will.
Right. One of the things that I love to do is when we have a candidate who looks good on paper, mm-hmm. and he comes here and we have a discussion, I love to take that person to lunch so we can be relaxed. And I'll say, look, we've spent all morning trying to sell ourselves to you, right? Actually, that's wrong. We spent all morning with you trying to sell yourself to us. Right. I said, now we need to sell ourselves to you.
So let me tell you a little bit about who we are.
Yes.
Something like that. Okay.
Well, it's more of a direct question. I'll say, what are you looking for? Mm-hmm. What are you looking for in a company? What are you looking for in supervisors? What are you looking to accomplish in the next 5 years? How can we help you accomplish those goals? And 9 times out of 10, I won't hear from them again. It scares them. Hmm. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I think they should buy us, because if they buy us, then they're more apt to stay here longer.
It's more about a career than a paycheck.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what advice would you give somebody wanting to become a helicopter mechanic, just coming into the industry?
I had a young man come in recently, and he said, I want to work in helicopters, but everybody wants experience, and nobody will give me the experience. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, I would be willing to give you a shot, and teach you the experience, have the opportunity to gain the experience. I says, but you will have to you will have to make a commitment. You will have to commit to learning the right way. You will have no shortcuts for you. You'll have to commit to being professional. So that would be one of my biggest recommendations or piece of advice, is that if you're going to do this, commit to doing it the right way and go all in.
Okay. That's all I have. Any other by the ways, anything you'd like to add?
Never quit.
Yeah.
Never quit. Hang in there. I've always heard that if you want to be successful, just never quit. Always persist.
Yeah. I guess that's good closing words. Yeah. Thanks for your time. Yeah.
Thank you.